about another great scholar of Islam known as Sa'id ibn Jubayr. But before I start talking about him, to refresh your memory, so far we have talked about two companions. The first one was a youth companion known as Mu'adh ibn Jabal. And the second one was a female companion, an older lady known as Khawla bint Tha'laba. And in the Quran she was referred to as what? التي تجادلك في زوجها. The woman who was arguing with you about a matter with her husband. So today we'll talk about another scholar who comes from a slave background. And what we learn from the story of Khawla is that woman with Islam found a new self-esteem. Because when people have a lower self-esteem, they cannot think critically. They cannot question things. They just accept whatever happens to them. And that was the situation of women before Islam. But in Islam there is a new reality now. Now they have a higher self-esteem. They have a new identity. And that's why they started challenging and questioning many of the jahili and ignorant practices that were rampant in Arabia. And one of the things that this woman questioned was this practice that was known as zihar, which we talked about last Sunday. Now, in addition to women, there was another segment in society that was also discriminated, demoralized, and pushed to the margin of society. And that was the segment known as al-abid or al-mawali. The slaves or al-mawali, the ex-slaves. So the slaves and ex-slaves, similar to women, were not seen fit for anything worthy. And just to illustrate the point, one of the legendary figures in Arab poetry is a man known as Antara ibn Shaddad. So Antara ibn Shaddad, his mother was an Abyssinian slave, dark-skinned Abyssinian slave. So she became pregnant for her master, a leader or a chief of the tribe. And the boy who was born took the color of his mother, dark skin. The father didn't like that. So he refused to recognize him. And even though he was his son, he treated him like a slave. So one time, the tribe was attacked by another enemy tribe. And they were about to be defeated. So the master or the father, in a state of despair, he started calling on Antara, saying, Antara, Antara, fight, fight. Antara responded by saying, well, slaves are not good for fighting. So he said to him, Antara, you're free. Go and fight. And this word free was the trigger that sounded like a volcano. Something amazing came out of Antara. He became one of the top knights for Fursan in Arabia, and also one of the top poets in Arabic language. In Arabic language, there are those masterpieces of poetry known as al-mu'allaqat. Anybody who studies Arabic literature, one of the first things they study is al-mu'allaqat. They call them al-mu'allaqat because they used to hang them in the walls of the Kaaba, recognizing their unique and outstanding eloquence in Arabic. So one of the people whose poem were put on the walls of the Kaaba was this man, Ankar ibn Shaddad. So the point is, when you are a slave in those kinds of society, you're always looked upon down, you would not be fit for anything that's worthy. But with Islam, things change. And the Prophet ﷺ in many verses in the Quran was told to be in the company of these people. He was corrected in the Quran in Surah Abasa when he turned away from a blind man who comes from a very low social background. And he was told, وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ. Do not turn your eyes away from them. And that's why you see many slaves and ex-slaves coming to positions of prominence at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Bilal, for example, Zayd ibn Haritha, and many others. Then you see something amazing happening in the generation of the Tabi'een. Who are the Tabi'een? So the generation that met the Prophet ﷺ and believed in the Prophet, they are known as the Sahaba. So for anyone to qualify to be called a Sahabi, they must fulfill two criteria. One, they must have met the Prophet personally, and they must have believed and followed the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Jahl cannot qualify to be a Sahabi. Why? He met the Prophet, but he did not believe in the Prophet, and that's why we don't call him Sahabi. And Najashi, he believed in the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, he died before the Prophet. But we don't call him Sahabi, we call him Tabi'i, because he did not meet the Prophet ﷺ, but he met the companions of the Prophet. So a Sahabi is someone, or she could be a woman, Sahabiya, who believed in the Prophet and met the Prophet ﷺ. A Tabi'i are those who met the companions of the Prophet. They did not meet the Prophet, but met the companions of the Prophet. So something amazing happened in the generation of the Tabi'een, the generation that met the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. You find a large number of scholars coming from those who were either slaves themselves or come from slave backgrounds, Mawali. And just to illustrate the point, there was a Khalifa known as Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And he was well-versed and well-learned Khalifa. So one time he met another scholar who came from Medina known as Zuhri. So he asked Zuhri and told him, and he said, Zuhri, tell me who is the prime or the most important scholar of Mecca. He told him, Ata ibn Abi Rabah. Who's Ata ibn Abi Rabah? He told him where he's from, the Mawali. And the historians describe him that Ata ibn Rabah had a typical African complexion. He was half almost paralyzed, so didn't have any social attributes that people at that time would consider eligible for someone to be at that status. So Ata ibn Rabah was the top scholar of Mecca. Then he asked him, who's the top scholar of Yemen? He told him Tawus, and this was Tawus from the Mawali. He asked him about the Sham, he told him Makhul. He kept naming and naming and naming, and Abdul Malik was really surprised that he named almost 7 or 8 locations across the Muslim world, and all the top scholars were from the Mawali except for one who was an Arab, who was a scholar of Al-Kufa. So what you find is, with the emergence of Islam, women found a new self-esteem. Similarly, slaves and ex-slaves found also a new self-esteem. And that's why, my brothers and sisters, today you open a book of tafsir, Some of the prominent names that you will come across: Mujahid, Ikrimah, Tawus, Sa'id ibn Jubayr, all of these are from the Mawali. So one of these Mawali that we want to talk about is Sa'id ibn Jubayr. Now the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, one person described them known as Masruq. He says, جالست أصحاب محمد فوجدتهم كالإخاب. He said, I met the companions of Muhammad ﷺ, and I found them to be like a well. الإخاذ يكفي الواحد. Some of them is like a well that has sufficient water for one person. Another of them would be someone who has enough sufficient for 10. Another would be 100. Another would be someone who has, is like a well that has sufficient water for all people in the world. So the level of knowledge was at different levels. So one of the companions who would fit the description of someone who was like a well that has sufficient water for all the humanity was Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas was a companion of the Prophet ﷺ, a young companion. He was a teenager when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. But he has so much knowledge and so much depth that people gravitated towards him to learn. He established a school in Mecca known as Madrasatul Tafsiri fi Mecca, the Tafsir school in Mecca. And he was surrounded by many brilliant students. And it's amazing, you'll find that most of them were from the Mawali. And one of his brilliant students was this man we are talking about, which is Sa'id ibn Jubayr. We don't know much about his early life, but what we know is he comes from a Abyssinian background, dark skin, and a man who didn't have much big social status in Arabia at that time. He became a student of Abdullah ibn Abbas. And he reached to such a level of prominence and knowledge that they used to say Abdullah ibn Abbas would allow him to answer questions and to give fatwa in his presence. Later, Sa'id ibn Jubayr moved to Kufa. And people from Kufa, they would come to Mecca to ask Abdullah ibn Abbas. And he would say to them, why would you come to me when you have Ibn al-Dahman, that was his nickname, Sa'id ibn Jubayr, amongst you? Now Sa'id ibn Jubayr later was assigned to a position in an army led by a man known Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'ath. And this man, this commander, was very successful in spreading Islam in many regions of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and many other areas. But at that time, there was a tyrant that emerged in Iraq known as Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, just to give you a flavor of his brutality, he would come to a gathering of men and he would say, إِنِّي أَرَى رُؤُوسًا قَدْ أَيْنَعَتْ وَعَانَ قِطَافُهَا. I see heads ready to be chopped off. So he was a tyrant. And there was some conflict between him and Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'ath, and he decided to revolt against him. And this revolt was one of the most powerful revolts in Islamic history, known as Thawrat ibn al-Ash'ath, and it's also known as Thawrat al-Fuqaha, the revolution of the Fuqaha, of the scholars, because there was a large number of scholars who joined him. One of these scholars was Sa'id ibn Jubayr. But unfortunately, that revolution was crushed later, and Sa'id ibn Jubayr was taken as a captive. And they say that historians talk about a long conversation between him and this tyrant, which shows his courage. and his stand on principle. And later, of course, he killed him. And they say that Sa'id ibn Jubayr, before his death, made a dua, and he said, Allahumma la tusallithu ala ahadin min ba'di. He said, oh Allah, basically saying, make me his last victim. And the historians say that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf did not last long after him. And his deathbed, he used to say, Mali wa mali Sa'id ibn Jubayr. Why would I have done this to Sa'id ibn Jubayr? Now when he died, there was so much sadness. Maymun, another scholar, says, there was no one on this planet who was not in need of the knowledge of Sa'id ibn Jubayr. Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said that he was the most knowledgeable person when it comes to the exegesis, the tafsir of the Quran. So three things we can note about Sa'id ibn Jubayr. First of all, an amazing and outstanding scholar who come from a lower social background, but that lower social background did not hinder him from reaching to this position of prominence and knowledge, because Islam gave him a new identity. Islam has told him that your color doesn't matter. Allah has said in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nasu, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, and then at the end the verse says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best among us here are those who are conscious of Allah, who have taqwa. That understanding transformed people. Color did not matter. Martin Luther's dream in the 20th century was to see in America where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, rather by the content of their character. A manifestation of that was seen in the generation of the Tabi'een, when you see so many outstanding scholars rising to that level of prominence. So the first thing about Sa'id ibn Jubayr, a man of deep knowledge. But in our Islamic tradition, knowledge without action is useless. ولذلك when we say alim in Islamic tradition, رجل جمع بين العلم والعمل, the person who has knowledge but also lives with what he teaches. So he was a man of devotion and integrity and love of the Quran. And the third thing about Sa'id ibn Jubayr was a man who has a sense of social justice. And that's why he decided to stand beside Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'as and revolt against this tyrant of Al-Iraq, Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. I can give you a challenge. Go and open the book of Tafsir, simple Tafsir of Ibn Kathir. Just flip through the pages. For sure you will find across different pages, وَقَالَ سَعِيدُ ibn Jubayr. And Sa'id ibn Jubayr said this, Sa'id ibn Jubayr said this. So today, in our understanding of our Quran, we depend on the students of Abdullah ibn Abbas, one of them being Sa'id ibn Jubayr. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless his soul. And every time you read the tafsir and you come across his name, make dua for him. And remember, it's not only Sa'id. Mujahid was from the Mawali, Tawus also from the Mawali. These are the people who Islam give them a new identity and a new self-esteem. So inshallah, the last Sunday, next Sunday, we will talk about scholar who Imam Abu Hanifa said to his mother that he would eat the faludaj with this knowledge. Faludaj was the most delicious food. And the mother said to Abu Hanifa, keep quiet, you're just an old man who lost his mind. This great scholar is Abu Yusuf, the brilliant student of Imam Abu Hanifa. Inshallah, we'll talk about him. And with that, we will conclude this series of Ramadan. وجزاكم الله خيرا.